You're listening to Coding Blocks, episode 59. Subscribe to us and leave us a review in iTunes, Stitcher, and more using your favorite podcast app.
Visit us at codingblocks.net where you can find show notes, examples, discussion, and more.
Send your feedback, questions, and rants to comments at codingblocks.net. Follow us on Twitter at codingblocks or head to www.codingblocks.net and find all our social links there at the top of the page. With that, I'm Alan Underwood.
I'm Joe Zach.
And I'm Michael Outlaw.
All right, so first up, we got the podcast news. We're going to start by thanking you guys for your wonderful reviews. And in iTunes, we got quite a few great ones, so thank you very much. Guest Baton, ES Lent, Dreed44, Skirovs, and JBorn33.
Yep, and so I've got Stitcher. We had Tappin, The Doug, Mosquito Bite, Tim B, Yellow Snowman. That one's fantastic. Skirovs, at Newton. And this one was a challenge thrown down by our Italian CS friend who's riding around in Rome listening to us. So here we go. Arnabaldo Cernabalde Schifi. I'm pretty sure that's close. I don't know if I hit it, but the only thing I do want to point out is in his review, he said that we make him feel a little bit more sane with his thoughts, and I feel like that should scare him a little bit.
Yeah,
I'm just
probably
saying.
be a little more insane.
Right.
But did you notice there was one in there twice?
There was. Skirovs. Yeah.
Hit us
Thank
up
you.
on both
Awesome.
iTunes and Stitcher, so super thanks.
Yep. Big thank you to all of you. We enjoy reading them. We say it every time and we mean it. So thank you very much.
And for the full show notes, visit codingblocks.net/episode 59.
Sweet.
So I had this thought. We've all seen movies and TV shows about it. We've talked about this in our Slack channels about. You ever noticed how Hollywood portrays hackers and hacking, and how weird, like anything related to technology, they never get it right. Have you noticed this?
Except for Mr. Robot. That one's pretty cool.
That's all I always hear about it.
Okay. That show is good, but I guess what I'm thinking of is like you see this more often in like one of the CSI variants, or I'm trying to think of. There's some recent movie that I want to talk about, but I don't want to give it away.
Don't do it.
Yeah, but at any rate, there where it's like, oh, this guy's hacking. Oh, well, let me hack him back, and we can get around this, right? If we like, oh, real time hacking. I know code. I know computers, and like Hollywood portrays this as like hacking is, or even programming. It doesn't even quote hacking. Just any kind of like, I know code, so I can program, so therefore I can like get my way around this. They portray it as like it's one gunman against another gunman, just because. But instead of replacing the guns with computers, have you noticed this?
Yeah, totally.
Has it ever annoyed you? But
it's comical.
But the reality, I was thinking about this in a recent movie that I just saw, and I was like, wait a minute, no, that's so. It's more like, well, I'm a building architect, and I'm going to change the blueprints to where the bathroom is over here. And then the other building architect is like, no, we're going to put the bathroom on this side just to counteract what you just did. But no building has actually been built. It's not, it's not running. It's not compiled yet. But then they're like, okay, now we're going to build the building. And they're going to do it like super quick. Does that make any sense?
That's closer. And usually there's landmines in between where all those bathrooms are actually going to be.
Oh, that's what you're
problem.
leaving in the bathroom, I thought. But
yeah.
It's just so sad and unfortunate. Like the way they portray anything related to technology, anything related to programming or anything about hackers, it just feels like it's never right.
But how sexy would it be to actually portray the real thing, right? Like it'd basically be somebody reading through API documentation for 2 hours to write that one line of code.
That's kind of my point, though, is that it's not. So you shouldn't do it. I mean, you wouldn't because here was the thought that came to mind was that like in the movie, one hacker starts to do something. The other hacker is like, oh, I can get this. Hold on. Give me a second. And so they start immediately trying to, hack, retaliate back to undo what the other guy just did. And I'm like, no, it would never work like that. The reality is, first you're going to have to clone that repo. Then you're going to have to figure out, you're going to spend like a stupid amount of time just going through the code because you're like, wait, what is this? Where is this? Where does this thing start? Why is that over there? Who would write it like that? And then you're going to find the actual spot. You're like, okay, I think this is where I'm going to need to run, where I need to make the change. But lo and behold, there's no unit tests. So now I got to co-create some unit tests. And that's after that's assuming you even got all the scaffolding in place to compile this thing and run it. Like, the reality is it's nowhere near as like real time and sexy as they try to portray it.
It's not that glamorous. And then you're going to realize that it was written in Spring and you're never going to get through the XML files, right? So
Old Spring.
Yeah, Old Spring, not Spring Boot. So, yeah, that's awesome. So I've got some really cool. Oh wait, were you about to say something, Joe? I saw you.
No, I was just thinking about those tweets that are like two unit tests, no integration tests.
Right.
Have you seen those? It'll be like two drawers that like like each one opens individually. Or like I think one of my favorite ones like it was a sink. And there was a basin for the sink, but like the water would clearly just shoot right out of the basin because it was like not put together very well. I mean, you have to see it to get the funnies, but it's good.
Excellent. So I have some really cool news that a lot of people in the Hackintosh world are loving right now, and even people that aren't necessarily Hackintoshers. Nvidia finally released their drivers that will work on OS 10 or the OS Sierra now, or Mac OS. I'm sorry. I will get it right eventually. But the funny thing is, so if you go up to their download page, which we'll have a link here, they don't list Mac OS as one of the operating systems. It's actually for FreeBSD, which is what, Mac OS was built on top of. So you can actually go out there and get drivers. So if you have an old cheese grater Mac laying around and you want to put in a 1080 because you need it, you can do that and you'll have drivers for it now. So it's very cool.
What a cheese grater Mac. I've never heard that term before.
Yeah,
Really?
before they had the trash can. It was the last of the good ones.
Okay.
Where it was the big aluminum case, but the front of it
holes
looked like
all
a
in it.
cheese grater.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. All right.
So, what if we tried designing C a second time? So on Reddit, on the Programmer Humor subreddit, there was the top post of the day. This great image that somebody posted, and we'll have a link to it in the show notes. But it basically goes through many different languages, and it's like, okay, well, what if this, what if that, what if? So I'm going to give you a couple examples, and then I'm going to hold off on some funny ones. But like just to give you an idea as to what we're talking about, right? So Java is, what if everything was an object? And C is, what if everything was a pointer? Right? So now you kind of get where we're going with this, right? You got the idea? So here was a couple funny ones that I really liked. So which one should I actually start with? Okay, we'll start with VB. What if we wanted to allow anyone to program? And VB.net, what if we wanted to stop them again? Right? That's awesome. Go, what if we tried designing C a second time? Then I love this one too. Pascal, begin. What if everything was structured? End. COBOL.
I like that C# a lot.
COBOL.
Oh, yeah.
What if everything was uppercase? Or C#. What if everything was like Java but different? And my absolute favorite one, the one that like seriously had me rolling the hardest. PHP. What if we wanted to allow... No, I'm sorry. I started reading the wrong line. PHP. What if we wanted to make SQL injection easier?
Oh, God.
So
what does JavaScript have to say about it?
JavaScript was, well, this one's going to be tough to say because they're referring to a dictionary, but they don't make it easy to say the abbreviation for that.
Word, right?
So I'm just going to say dictionary. So
All right.
what if everything was a dictionary and an object?
Okay.
It's a beautiful world to live in.
I
I'm
love
surprised
that.
that's all they have to say about JavaScript.
They had to keep them one-liners, right?
Yeah, it's got to be one-liners.
Yeah.
Can't
So it's fun to poke fun at your favorite and not so favorite languages.
Oh, good stuff.
Yeah. So this show we're going to do something a little different, and we got a chance to talk with Michael Crum and Clint Rutkus about something hot off the presses from Build 2017. So this is going to be a bit of a deviation from our normal format, but we thought you guys would enjoy it, so here we go. All right, so we are back for the most important part of today's show, where we're going to speak with Michael Crump and Clint Rutkus on some very important and very neat, cool bits coming out of Build 2017 this year. We're excited to talk about on all days, of course, but May the 4th be with you. And none of you are wearing Star Wars shirts. What is wrong with you guys? All
I
right,
have a nerd reference T-shirt. I have a real genius T-shirt on right now.
Nice.
I will take that.
Just
All right,
not to-
but the rest of you guys, we got to work on your game here. We got to step that up.
All right, so you guys go ahead and take it away.
okay.
Yeah,
So-
go ahead.
Michael, do you want to quickly explain what UWP is for the people that of the audience that don't truly know what the Universal Windows Platform development is?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you may be wondering kind of what is this UWP thing? So let me just attach that to whenever you think of UWP, you're thinking of the Universal Windows Platform. So one of the things that we've noticed is that there's a lot of different platforms in the Windows ecosystem. You have your IoT devices to your PCs to things like Surface Hub and even like Xbox. And with UWP, it helps you and it creates the framework that allows you to write applications that work on all of those different types of devices. So if you're already invested and you're doing things inside of the Windows system, UWP allows you to create one project type that will target all of those different platforms. So you can do things like reuse code. You can add things like adaptive triggers to make your applications look great on all those different types of devices. So that's kind of the real high level of it without kind of going into deep there about what UWP does. But that's something that I believe will be interesting to a lot of people that especially are wanting to build and extend to the Windows platform.
I would also like to just pile on another great advantage of UWP is it provides a clean install and uninstall experience. So it doesn't leave any legacy artifacts around for your application. So it also helps reduce registry hits, and it's a great packaging system as well. Your app can go to the store, or you can sideload your app as well if you're an enterprise or an individual user. It's just a really solid platform.
So it's allowing me to have a consistent Windows app experience, consistent with like what other apps might do and what the expectations that users may have on my app based on interactions they've had with other apps. But at the same time, I get this buy-in of I can deploy this code on multiple device types.
Yeah. Device families, yeah.
So this is the premier way. If I wanted to write a Windows client app today, like this would be the first thing I would want to look at, right?
Yeah, and also it's about modernizing, applications. So one of the things that, we've taken a look at is that, maybe, for example, your parents, the traditional way that they download and install software is they may go to, Bing or Google it, and it brings them to some random web page, and they're not sure if that web page is legit or whatever, and they go ahead and they download that MSI installer, they run it, and the next thing you know, they have all kinds of little floating cats around their screen or something.
I don't know if you know my parents, but they get all of their greatest software from a Nigerian prince who is only going to need a couple $1,000 in the bank account, and he will send them back $500,000.
Exactly. And but really, that's the type of things that we face. And now it's nice to be able to say, okay, if you need this software, you can actually go to the Windows Store and you can type in that. And I know if you download it from there, not only are you going to get an application that has been authorized by us, but also things like updating it. We know that parents and other people, they click away, if there's like a pop up from the tray that says, update this app, they're like, oh, that's going to, keep me from doing something else I'm trying to do. So yeah, things like updating is built in for free.
Yeah. And actually one of the updating and deploying your app is one of those things where everyone's like, oh, that's super easy. I'll just do this. But like the great thing with like the AppX format is it will actually do differential updating. So if you only update 1K of a 5 gig application, you download 1K. So
nice.
That just makes your end user's life so much easier. It makes your life so much easier. It's a fantastic new packaging format.
Very nice. And just to clarify for like the web developers out there, this is similar in when you were talking about the triggers and all that. When you develop, you're almost doing it for your most common denominator, right? So similar to responsive design on the web, that's sort of what this UWP gives you as far as for your Windows platforms.
That's a great way to think about it. We do refer to it as a responsive design as well, okay. Responsive layout.
And, cool. And the other thing to add in here is that if you are a web developer, it's not like you actually have to leave your stack and everything that you're already kind of doing. We have things called hosted web apps. We also are making some models there with progressive web apps. So if you have an existing website and you would like to package that up and to be put into the store, and maybe then you'll start getting all of your ad revenue versus people that are using a lot of different types of ad blockers. As a store, it's also will be easily discoverable, and you could add in other things if you wanted to, like in-app purchases, and start lighting up other features of UWP. So even if you are a web developer, you still have a home here.
Awesome.
So how do you improve on UWP? It sounds like it's pretty great already.
Yeah. So this brings us to our cool little toy that we're releasing. It's helping aid in the file new experience. And what we realized was this is an experience that has historically said, pick one of like 4 options, and that's what you get as your base. And then you have to go, rip out 50 things and put 50 other things in. And then it takes multiple hours to get where you need to go. So me and Michael basically were chit-chatting, and he was explaining about an application he built with his son, which was a cool little Minecraft app, and he's building up all these things, and he's kind of going like, wouldn't it be great if we could do some, improve this so I didn't have to go and research this and that. So we basically thought of what if we built a dynamic generating, wizard that you pick, here are the options I want, and we just output it. And for web devs, a great way to think about this is Yeoman. And so we built out Windows Template Studio. So you basically have 2 screens for our wizard. The first screen, you say, this is the type of app I want. And that is, what is your core framework? So are you picking code behind, MVVM Lite? If an external developer wants to add in new ones, they're more than welcome to. And then the other one is your project type. So what is the defining metaphor for navigation? So we have split view, pivot tab, and then blank. We have just a blank one, which you pick and choose what you want. So from there, you click next, and you can pick one of 6 current pages that we support, along with developer features such as background tasks, Azure notification hubs, live tiles, toast notifications. I feel like I'm forgetting a couple as well. It's just suspend and resume. So things that were historically complicated and takes lots of time to test out, we programmatically figured out ways to generate this and basically get you what would prior take maybe 2-ish hours, 2 to 3 hours prior, now takes 20 seconds.
Yeah, and I think to add on to that is to just think of this in your mind. If it takes one of us a couple of hours to scaffold one of these applications, when we live and breathe this every single day, imagine somebody that is not, who does not work with this platform, the type of pain that they would experience there, and how can we create a solution that gets them, from file new experience to F5 and an actual functional app that is very, make sure that we're not putting in too much code or too little code, that gets you to an application that you can actually start working with now instead of, going to a million documentation pages and start scaffolding that out.
And then another great thing that I mentioned, like, hey, prior you'd have to remove a lot of code. So, and Michael mentioned we have this fine line of not doing enough and too much. So in the scenarios where we're afraid we're going to do too much, we literally have documentation pages that we link out to. So a great example would be our settings page. We by default have theming support, which is a toggle button. But if you wanted to add in, maybe an integer-based or a string-based setting, that feels to me like something we shouldn't do and add in by default, because some people will want it removed. So we have a link directly to our GitHub page, and we explain in detail how to add in additional settings. And then other scenarios would be like, if you have a map page, where do I get the API key? Did I even know that I need an API key? So we have a bunch of developer to-dos that you can go through and remove the comment line, and we tell you exactly what we recommend you do there. So like a background task, this is where you should put your background task stuff. If you have a page, this is where your content should go. So we try to make your onboarding experience very, very easy and very, very quick.
And if you're
So this would basically be like if I wanted to create a UWP app, and we'll say, quote, the old days before this new template existed, then I would go file new, start that project up, and then my next course of action is I'm going to spend the rest of my day on Stack Overflow answering all these kind of questions, right? Like, how do I add the map in, and where do I put the API key? So we've distilled Stack Overflow into a file new experience now, to where now I'm just up and running in 5 minutes, and like all of those, or actually less. But now, like, you've already got those hooks in place, and like, pointers like, hey, insert your key here, right?
Yeah. Yes, and our big thing is we try to link to best practice documentation. So whether that is docs.microsoft.com or a engineer's blog or Stack Overflow, we want to, like I said, bring you up to speed and answer questions as fast as humanly possible that you may have, and give you the best documentation. And the key thing here is also we're working directly with the community to be sure that our practices and stuff that we link out to is actually what they would recommend or what they would think is useful. Same thing with the source code generated. We worked for MVVM Lite directly with Laurent, the creator of MVVM Lite, to be sure that how the folder structure is, how we're putting different files, how we're navigating around the project. This is what a MVVM Lite developer would expect. This is what the community, you guys, would expect the code to act and be like and look like. So we opened it up to the MVPs, the Microsoft Most Valuable Professionals, I think a couple days ago, and like the best feedback I've gotten are them nitpicking a line break between methods, and it was generated code where one file needed to get inserted above another and insert, and it was just we forgot a line break. But if they're nitpicking that, I feel like we've succeeded. And I can't wait until we open it up to the public and see what the public is trying to track down and find. And one of the great things also with it is our Visual Studio extension is independent of the templates. So if we do have a bug or have something that needs to get pushed out right away, the next time anyone update or runs the application, the extension will see the change on our CDN for the template file and download the new templates. So if there is an issue, it gets fixed in pretty much real time as soon as we update the CDN.
For a new project, though, right? Not on an existing?
That is correct, for the new projects.
And I think one thing to kind of tie in here is kind of going back to that whole code generation thing that Clint just mentioned. I will say that the people that I have talked to from the community and also my own experience with code generation, it's kind of people kind of already kind of think, or developers think, I'm not too sure about something that generates code. Is it going to be at the quality that I really want it to be at? And I think that's where we were able to take a nice step back and look at, other apps that generate code and look through that code and say, okay, I would have changed this, this, and this, and then actually getting it outside of, this office and,
outside the bubble.
Exactly. Outside the Redmond bubble and bringing in other people that live and breathe NVVM daily, even people that use code behind in some smaller applications. And that if we generated this, what would you think about it? And then get that feedback and take it back and make sure that when we output code, it's code you actually want versus code you're going to immediately go in and hit the delete key on.
I think if you had to hit the delete key minus the to-do items that we have for you, we failed. And I don't like failing. And I know Michael doesn't like failing. So
I don't.
That's why we directly partnered with the community to be sure that, like I said, what is being made is something that people would want. And it, like, every time we demo this, like, it amazes me how quickly people are like, how can I get this? I need this, like, tomorrow. And we're like, sure, here's the nightly feed. If you find bugs, please tell us about it. And it just makes us so happy when that happens.
Yeah, I got to start with the front page, and I actually got to learn a lot about HTML when I was first learning because I would go and see how they did it. So that was really nice. Although, the generated code, like you mentioned, had a bit of a reputation. But
front page 98, that was it. Front page 98. We all had the CDs. Remember that? It was shipped on the CD and everything, and you were like, "Oh yes,
yes, absolutely."
And like the key, I think one of the advantages we have is we're building out a scaffold, a framework for your application. So, like, I think Front Page did a great job, but the problem with Front Page is it created HTML and user-facing content, so it had to deal with a lot of like margins and adjustments. We're dealing with like the electrical for your house. Like, we can make assumptions, and those assumptions are going to be pretty spot on for almost everything. And then going to the UI, that's you guys. Like, we trust that you guys are going to put in and make it look how you want. We will do our best to make like the navigation pane fit to Microsoft standards for design guidelines. But past that, if you want to change it or customize it, go nuts. We highly encourage it. I would love to see what everyone creates.
And I think the thing with that app that's created is that as a developer, we typically don't really do a lot in terms of design. And I know that anytime that I have created, my own little kind of smaller app that I'm just going to kind of use, design is something I never even think about. I just want something functional. And while we like functional apps, we also want apps that people want to use. And so we've also worked with our design team here to make sure when you generate an application, you're not wondering, is this hamburger menu or navigation pane, is this starting, the right pixels over, the right amount of pixels over? What about the colors? Are the colors, like approved colors here? Can you do that? What happens when you actually select on a menu item? Well, is there supposed to be a background behind it, or what's going on? A lot of those questions that you may have out of the gate, those are things that we have addressed in the template that is available and that you're able to generate.
Very cool.
And a key thing that actually to actually do a counter against Michael here is we do Microsoft design best practices, but you as an end developer, pick and choose your own adventure. You don't have to stick to our guidelines. If you want your app to be fuchsia on black with, something wherever, go nuts. It's your app. You can do what you want. Don't assume that we are dictating rules and regulations to you.
But you have a nice starting block. You have a nice starting block, though, is really what it boils down to. Hey, so real quick, you guys haven't mentioned it. You skated around a little bit by saying, hey, if you have a particular type of project you want to add.
What you're going to say.
There's these two words that start with O and S. This is all open source, right? You guys are basically making it to where people can contribute to this.
Yes,
Yes.
and we highly encourage contribution and pull requests. We do have contribution guidelines that are best practices that we've picked up from basically .NET and other open source projects. It is under the MIT license, and our core goal here is to have a discussion before anything is actually implemented, because what we don't want is like 4 people building out the same thing and they all come in at the same time or roughly the same time, and everyone's like, my baby's better, like, look at this, and we're like, oh no, how do we deal with this? And we don't want hurt feelings, and also it's figuring out like, hey, did you think about the error use case, the error scenario of this? Or honestly, this actually happened, was the map control. We had just built in default location, but then someone's like, you know what we should really implement is getting the location actually added in and dealing with the scenario where a user says, no, I don't want to share my location. And that was a really great suggestion done by a community member, and he actually, Matt Lacey, committed a pull request for it. And we're like, that is fantastic.
That's killer.
Scenario that we were actually up in the air if we should support, and he did the entire thing.
So for my next project, rather than like doing file new blank app, I can do file new UWP app, and in 12 clicks, I can have localization included in, I can have mapping services included in, I can have theming. All of this is already scaffolded out for me, and all I got to do is focus on what the core of my application is going to solve, right? And of course, I can do this in my favorite language, VB.NET.
So two little things. So it's C#. And the other key, currently we only support C#. If people are very interested in VB, 100% let's have that discussion. The localization, the app is by default built out to be localized, but it is currently set to ENUS only. And this was actually a feature we had figured out ways to do it, but it wasn't, I would say, user friendly in the wizard, because you needed, like, you'd add in a new language and then it would be like, well, what's the code? And I know like 4 codes off the top of my head, but then it wasn't as straightforward and easy as we wanted. So we said, hey, let's make it localizable, or the app is localizable by default. It's ENUS. You can use like the multilingual toolkit to actually help auto generate everything for you. But we're going to provide a good solid foundation, and then we're going to figure out how to do it better in the future.
I will say that the multilingual toolkit is absolutely something that you should use. At least you should start with, is taking a look at that. And obviously, if you're getting ready to publish an application, there's a ton of services. There's actually services that we list in our Dev Center benefits that will allow you, to get an actual real translator and take a look at that before you go live with that. But right now, it's as simple as there is a regex file. You can copy that, and that will at least take care of a lot of text box, about settings, settings panes, and things of that nature to kind of get you started.
Very cool.
So here's the thing, like, I don't know, Joe, Alan, like if you think about this, right, like we often take for granted, like when we do that file new, when we make our selections of what type of app that we want to create, right, what that's actually doing, right, that there was a team of developers that sat there, that was their project for a period of time, right, was to write some code that wrote your code that you're later then going to take credit for writing. So, thank you. But you never really think about it. You take that for granted, right? So, you guys, it must have taken a whole team of people, a long time to write this thing, right? Like, this is a huge effort.
Years, right?
No, it's
like 50 people, all of Microsoft.
All of Microsoft. No, so basically, I talked about it a bit earlier, where me and Michael kind of had a little brainstorming session, And then every year, Microsoft has on campus a Microsoft MVP Summit where the MVPs come on campus, and we have we basically disclose a lot of our roadmaps and features that we're going to be potentially building out and kind of using them as a sounding board. And so we pitched the idea to the MVPs as our final gut check, because everyone we talked to internally liked the idea, but going back to, we're afraid we live in a little bubble. So what did the community think? And the community overwhelmingly was positive, and we even threw a little focus group. And at the time, I had written probably a good solid like 30 or 40 page spec on this, and didn't tell them that we had this spec, and said, what do you guys want in this? And we built out kind of on the whiteboard a prototype, list of features, prioritized features. We basically gave them, we call it dev cache. So how much resources would you prioritize for this versus that? Like, what do you want? Is a map control more important than the master detail page? That's a good question. Like, where should we put our resourcing for designing and developing? So we did that. We had a little SWAT team of basically 4 devs plus me and Michael help build out a good solid prototype. We opened it up to the developers that were the MVPs that were at that focus group, and then started migrating and or transforming the project into something that everyone was super proud of.
And you remember, Clint, like that focus group, there was actually, we weren't necessarily expecting there to be so many people, but there were so many people that I actually had to grab chairs from other conference rooms.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
That's cool.
There was that many people that was interested, and we were looking at each other like, oh, I didn't know that many people. But
and
this
many people
also
cared about a file new experience.
exactly. But also this was we also we run developer surveys all the time. You may have been on some of those, and this was one of the top asks from the community was, to bring back a better way for that file new experience.
Yeah.
That's killer. So I want to point out a few things, because one of the talks that we saw at a meetup here, not recently, but last year, Michael and I attended, and Sean Wittermuth, one of your MVPs that's been an MVP for 15 years or so, one of the hottest topics was, let's start an ASP.NET Core app from scratch, because the problem was you go and create the .NET app using the file new, and it would give you so much garbage, and you wouldn't really know what was there, what wasn't, what you would actually have to add if you were going to start from scratch. So I want to point out, like, for people that are just trying to kind of get their feet under them, one of the cool things is like what they're describing is almost like designing your own pizza, right? You start off, you have this blank pizza, and you say, hey, on half of it, I want this. On this, I want some, olives over here, whatever. And at the end, you hit finish, and you have your pizza, right? That's kind of essentially what you built.
Exactly.
So here's
I call it pick your own adventure, but yeah, that works.
Yeah, totally. So the cool part is
talking about pizza.
I mean, I like pizza.
It's almost 11 o'clock, and now I'm hungry because
that's awesome.
Way to go, Alan.
Well, check this out. So here's where I'm going with this. One of the things that I really like is Sean Wildermuth's presentation was awesome because it helped step you to understanding what was in core, right? This can do a similar type thing. So let's say that you start off and you choose the bare minimum things. You say that you want the tab navigation, and that's it. You could generate that, put that off into a folder. You could come back through and do another one and say, okay, well, what if I wanted to add a map? And then you could actually just kind of do like a beyond compare of the two directories and say, hey, what changed between these, right? And you as a developer with no understanding of any of it can start to see how this thing, grows as you add more pieces to it. So you can kind of get an understanding of, oh, well, if I wanted to add my own thing, these are the kind of places I would need to look to do that. So I see this as being useful, not just for a starting ground, but also for just understanding, like you said, you guys are taking best practices and you're trying to build code off the best practices out there. So this is like almost, rather than sitting down and watching a YouTube video, you can get your hands dirty and sort of interactively learn how to do this.
Yeah, and actually, if you even wanted to do the, I would say, nerdier approach, is you could go to our template directory on the GitHub and see how we're actually generating like how we're adding in the maps page to an MVVM versus a code behind. Because you can
Nice.
literally look at the file and see, here are the files that they are adding, here's the stuff that they're injecting. It's very, very interesting and really nerdy on how we do some of this stuff. And another cool thing is actually we're leveraging another open source project to do by Visual Studio to generate our apps. So it's open source using open source.
Yeah, I was going to ask if you guys are doing T4 in the background.
We are not actually using T4. We're using the new Visual Studio template generator.
I didn't even know that existed. All right, that's another thing we got to look up.
Currently public.
I will
Very
say
cool.
for those people that are trying though to learn that tech as you mentioned, and they are looking at maybe code behind, especially for new programmers, they may or may not have a need for some of the heavier frameworks like MVVM that just wants to understand how it works. You could always go in, you select that one page, that map, and then you finish the project, and that is a great learning experience. Like how did we wire up that button to go to that new page? What about navigation? All the navigation, going back, going forward, how does that work? You're able to see that without going through hundreds of lines of code that traditionally people would have to deal with.
Awesome.
Well,
Yeah,
I
I
love
mean-
the idea of kind of hanging out on my couch, and watching Netflix or something in the background, and I say, "Oh, I've got an idea for a map. I want to see where where the closest Pokemon is or something," and I can just kind of go in here, file new, create up a new app, say I want the map, and a few other things, background tasks. There we go. And now I'm playing around with it in just minutes, and I'm absorbing this stuff and kind of learning and having some fun and learning in the background, and I don't have to mess with the stuff that I don't really care about. I can just kind of focus on my fun little thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the cool part is, again, I mean, they talked about it at the beginning, this is UWP. So imagine, right, you made your little Pokemon app that you started messing around with. You had it up and running in 5 minutes. Like literally, you hit create, you can hit F5, you have an app running. And now you can deploy this to an Xbox, right? You could literally have something like this on an Xbox. You could have it on your tablet. You could have it on a computer. Like, it's super, super cool what you could do in very little time and effort.
Yep.
Yeah,
No,
and that
I
was
don't want to use Pokemon, like maybe Pac-Man. Everything's taken.
I highly suggest you respect other people's copyrights.
Right.
Yeah. Totally. You call it something like Pokemon, and then you're good.
I think one thing to add in here is that, again, this is open source, and that you may have your own templates that you want to add or create or help contribute. But also you may be in an environment where maybe you want to take our code and generate your own Vuzix installer. Maybe you're in healthcare, or maybe you're in an industry that, it's a little bit tighter and people want more control of it. Again, you have the ability, to take this and run with it and do what you want with it. And obviously love to have you contribute back, but this should be able to fit your needs no matter what industry you're in.
Yeah. So like a great example would be like, hey, I work at Ruckus Co, and Ruckus Co has very specialized templates. So I could totally download the source code, point it to a different CDN, and install it on my end users' computers or my end developer computers, and then we could work on our own private fork of basically the source code.
That's awesome.
So we definitely tried to make it very adaptable, very useful, and can't wait until we open it up to the entire world and see what possibilities there are.
Yeah, I have a dumb question. I don't know if we ever said this. What is the official name of this? Like, if I want to go Google it to actually go download.
Official name, do you want to say it, Michael?
Oh, it was fun. Windows Template Studio.
Windows Template Studio. Okay.
Yes.
I like it.
And if you want, you can find it at aka.ms/WTS, and it will forward to our GitHub page, and we have full-blown install instructions if you want to get it from the official Microsoft Visual Studio gallery, or if you want to try our nightlies. It's pick and choose your own adventure.
So if I wanted to get started, tomorrow, I would need something like Visual Studio, like Visual Studio Community would work, right?
Yeah,
Which is free.
You need Visual Studio 2017. You will need the Creators Update SDK, which is 15.086, and build 15.086, and then you go and which is also the UWP workload. So you basically then go to your extensions, or I think it's tools, extensions, and updates. Click that. Click the online tab, search for Windows Template Studio, and click install, restart Visual Studio, and it'll be in your file new experience.
Awesome. Hey,
And we'll have a link to some instructions too,
Yep.
right?
We'll have the GitHub will have full blown instructions.
Hey, and so also to add to that, because this is UWP, the OS has to be at least 8 or higher, right? Windows
UWP has to be Windows 10.
Windows 10. Okay.
So we target current release and current release -1. So we support Creators Update and Anniversary Update. So that's 14.393 and 15.086.
But if you download Visual Studio 2017 like today, and you once you start the installer, there is the workload there, and all you have to do is simply make sure you have a check mark in the Universal Windows platform, and it will take care of that for you.
Everything works.
Very cool. And then the other thing I want to bring up is, so what used to be Xamarin Studio, which is now Visual Studio for Mac, what's that look like for this?
So currently this works on Windows 10. We do not currently support Xamarin. It is something that is actually we do have a GitHub issue on this. We'd love to see kind of what everyone is thinking and feeling, and going back to what is the best way to support this. Like for us, a big question was how do we support a minimal viable product? What's our shipping bar? What's our things that we absolutely must ship with? So we talked about localization. I made the gut call along with talking with Michael of, hey, to do localization the way we would love to do it requires too much time and effort, and we could rat hole and it could delay the entire product from shipping. So let's just support ENUS for now, and then we'll revisit it. Same thing with a great feature that we want and will shortly implement is right-click add. So you already generated your app, you want to right-click add it. The problem is like I think my spec has 4 pages talking about all the different permutations that an application could be. Like maybe you didn't use Template Studio to build this out. So then what kind of assumptions can we make? Like do we basically have to rerun assumptions? Like are you using MVVM Lite? Is this code behind? Hey, you really should check this into source code before we touch your project. Kinds of assumptions like that. So we want to work with the community and figure out what's best for the product and just create a really, really solid V1. And we know that there's lots of more features and new things that people want. We just have to be sure that we do them correctly.
But in short, all the fun of writing suspend and resume code has now been taken away from us. So
hey man, that is every day my favorite thing to write. Every day.
And I am really sure there's a lot of other questions that are going to be popping up around, adding feature X, Y, and Z. Again, just like you were saying with Xamarin, I think, if we keep in mind this is, a 1.0 type of release, that there is a lot more goodness that can come from this project.
And I love that too. For anybody listening here, this is the way real software is built, right? You have to make trade-offs. So, I know there's several people in our audience that they're like, well, how do I do this? Or how do I get started? Or how do I make this? You have to make trade-offs. And so I think that's an excellent point, though. This is open source. There's a community around it. So if you have an opinion, you can get involved. So again, we'll have those links, definitely go out there and pitch in.
Yeah, I can give an entire discussion on just even shipping. Like the question is like, okay, is this it's a cool thing to add into the source code now, but we're 7 days away from shipping. Do we wait? Do we is this a must-have item? Like, yeah, you touch two lines of code, who cares? But then it's that if you give a mouse a cookie problem, like, well, if that got in, this gets in, and it spirals out of control. So then then it's like, we already have pull requests by the community for new pages. But at a certain point, I had to go, put my fist down and go, we're at code freeze. Like the bug bar, the feature bar is now this high. And then, yesterday I was talking to some of our developers. I'm like, it is through the roof now. Nothing can get checked in without my direct approval. And like every morning it's like, okay, let's go see what things have to get done.
That's excellent.
I think this is also, you can also think of this not only with, the existing stuff that we've added in, but also, hey, there's all this new stuff that's coming. There's a lot of new stuff that we're talking about, at Build. And, what would be my best practices for adding some of those features as we add them to Windows Template Studio in the future of, actually now I can go here and I can pull that in and start using that in my application. So I think it's also good for what we already have, but also a future looking of things that we have recently announced and things that we're going to be adding in.
I cannot wait until we're allowed to talk about some of the stuff we're going to talk about at Build.
So
I think we're
hashtag tease.
Oh,
nice.
So HoloLens will be in version 1.0.0.1.
Right.
I do not know. I do not comment on rumors or speculation.
That's very nice.
Well, I think we're all super appreciative of the community focused and open source nature that Microsoft has migrated to. That is really awesome, and we all really appreciate that. That was a huge change for the organization as a whole, so it's super awesome, and we appreciate you guys putting this out there. So we're going to include links to the GitHub repo for this project. We'll have links to the blog posts as well, so you can see more information, learn how to get your next app started using the new Template Studio. If you want to reach Michael on Twitter, he is at mbcrump, MBCRUMP, and Clint is on Twitter at Clint Ruckus, CLINTRUTKAS.
Yeah,
with that,
right.
Creating a ruckus.
Yeah.
I had to say,
trouble.
Sorry. That's as good as
I'm the presser of the red button.
Okay, so we hope that you certainly enjoyed hearing about those the new bits that are coming from out of Build 2017. But since we didn't get to do my favorite part of the show, typically during the middle-ish, somewhere in that line, we're going to do it now. So it's time for Survey Says. All right, so which programming language are you most envious of? Is the survey from the last episode. Now, we gave a lot of choices in this one. C, C#, C++, F#, Go, Haskell, Java, JavaScript, Python, R, Ruby, Swift, TypeScript, VB.NET.
Ooh, who gets to guess first?
You go ahead, man.
All right. It's between two for me. So no, three. Oh, three. There's definitely three. Part of me wants to say C++ because, like, I kind of think of that as being like the hardcore super programming. Part of me wants to say Haskell because it's like super functional, but then there's like the Go hotness. So I'm gonna go with Haskell with 17%.
Oh, that's insane. There's no way.
Haskell,
All right.
17%. Gauntlet thrown.
There's no way. I was going to say I think a lot of people are probably doing Java or C# or one of these major ones out there. So I'm going to say I think people are envious of Swift. And I'm going to give it I don't know why. And then I'm going to give it 8%.
Oh, I feel a wind coming on.
All right. Swift. I mean, the only reason why I was saying like really was just because I mean, I guess you're assuming like a lot of people want to do iOS development is where
That's pretty much
kind of
it.
what you're suggesting.
Yeah, and Objective-C like sucked so
that
hard,
wasn't
and
even on the
people
list.
were super excited about when Swift came out because it was so much better. So that's the only reason I went that route.
And
Okay.
emoji variable names. Yep.
Okay, I mean, fair enough logic. All right, but you lost.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
Yeah. Joe, you did too. I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't doubt it.
Yeah, you were both off.
Does it go?
So no. Actually, this one was surprising. I'm going to say that our audience is messing with us on this one. There's no way this is the answer.
They picked R.
But, I mean, I threw this one in there as a joke, and I guess they picked up on the joke and decided to play along with it because the winning one is VB.net. What if we could make them stop working again?
Oh, that's hilarious.
That's awesome.
So
What was the percentage? It had to have been a big joke.
it was like 29%. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so what was the real one after that then, right? That's the question.
Say what now?
What was the real one that people chose after VB.net?
Okay, after VB.net, yeah, you're still both wrong. Let me just say though, I guess if I had to like pick a temperature, like, okay, well, who's mostly right between the two of you? Joe is more right than Alan. Let's say that.
I don't know how you could be more right.
Yeah, I mean,
Price is Right rules.
Because he picked 3 languages?
no, but no, his final answer was Haskell, I thought.
Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. So, no, it was actually, second place was a tie between C# and Python
Interesting.
All right.
at 11%.
Well, that kind of makes me happy.
Yeah. So I found that curious.
Huh.
Yeah.
How did JavaScript do?
Yeah, like 4.5.
Well, the
Yeah.
reason why I think JavaScript wasn't picked is because that's what everybody's programming in. So there's
Yeah.
nothing to envy there. Like, that's what they're doing.
Yeah, that might explain some of them. Yeah, maybe.
That was a fun one. I like that.
Yeah.
So VB.net, like either people have a good sense of humor, or and we've been trolled, or we're insulting everybody right now.
Probably.
29% of our listeners.
It's probably like a combination of all of that.
Yeah, we're straddling the line somewhere.
But because we're doing this show all out of order, I now want to ask you, if you haven't already, please take this opportunity to leave us a review. You can head to www.codingblocks.net/review, and you can find links to your favorite aggregators there where you could leave us a review, and we would greatly, super duper, hugely appreciate. I mean, huge. This is huge. Appreciate that review.
Yep. And so, what's our next one? This
Okay.
is the new.
So our new survey for this episode is an easy one. Like, everyone, you're going to hear this and you're going to be like, oh, this is a super easy one. I can't wait to vote in on this one. And the question is simple. How cool is your company? And your choices are extremely cool. They pay for my conferences. Very cool. They give me time off for conferences. And lastly, they suck. I'm lucky if I even get time off approved. So obviously you can hear that we kind of have conferences on the mind. I mean, after all, we're talking about Build 2017. We're kind of thinking conferences. Maybe you are too.
And these
Yeah, I
are
kinda think
anonymous.
Yeah.
That's right. These are anonymous. And we do kind of think that most companies do not send programmers out, which is, I think, a shame, because I do think that there's a lot of value in companies encouraging their employees to keep up. Because, old friend of mine, well, he's not old. A friend of mine once asked the question, would you rather that your employees learn new stuff and sometimes leave, or would you rather they learn nothing new and stay?
That's a great point.
Yeah, but I'm curious. Like, what do you think is like the more valuable though way to learn though? Do you think that I love to go to conferences to hear the new things, but do you think that's like the most bang for buck?
I think that is the best way to broaden your way of thinking. not necessarily the best way to implement, right? I think that's how I always look at the conferences. You just get fed through a fire hose. You know, it's the drinking through a fire hose, but you get exposed to so much that you didn't even know existed before. And that's what I love about them. Whereas, you know, going to a 2-day training course, yeah, you might be able to code some stuff in C# right after you get back. But it was literally just, hey, this is how you do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you on the exposure.
Yeah, I kind of always wonder, like, as far as bang for buck, like, I think like something like a Pluralsight or a Code School is, you know, it's cheap and there's potentially a lot of value there. But I do think conferences are up there. So it's kind of like, if you're going to do one thing for your employees, then maybe the Pluralsight thing is the way to go. If you're going to do two things, though, conferences are really awesome. Developers love it. They get inspired. They come back. They inspire the teammates. They come back with new ideas and meeting people, and it's just a really cool thing to do. But it's kind of harder to assign a monetary value to that, I think.
Inspiration is a huge point, though, that you just made. So, I mean, you each made some really good points there as to like, you know, the exposure and then the inspiration that you get out of the conference.
And I think if companies are doing it right, when they send their people out, you know, if let's say that people get put on a rotation, right? Like maybe one time I get to go, the next time you get to go or whatever. If it's almost like a requirement that person put together a set of slides or something so that they can bring back and share it with the group, then that kind of pays dividends all the way around. And, you know, it can help build up the morale. It can get some excitement rolling. And again, it can inject some new ideas. So I don't know. I think there's ways to where the company can get back out of it what they're investing in, you know?
Or send a couple at once and you got some team building too.
Yeah, true.
Yeah. But it does kind of assume, though, that what you were talking about with the notes, though, that everyone's going to take notes, A. B, they're going to take good notes. And then lastly, C, be able to, you know, do a decent presentation back on that information.
Yeah. But it's a good skill building exercise all the way around. So, yeah, man, I'm curious to see what these come back with, because I think more companies should do it. I don't know how many actually are, so we'll see how this one turns out.
Yeah, I'm really hoping that most of the companies are going to be extremely cool.
Yeah, agreed.
All right. Well, let's get into the resources that we like. Anyone got one?
We got one. So being that we just talked about this with Build, there are, you know, quite a few things going on with Microsoft Build right now. They're, you know, we've talked about it before. They're now the largest contributor to open source that there is, right? So there's a lot of really cool stuff going on. So go check out build.microsoft.com. They've got some live streaming stuff, and you can find out about things that are going. Again, even if you're not a .NET developer or whatever, this just might be a way to broaden your horizons a little bit.
Hey, you know what? I was talking with the MS Dev guys today. Just kind of joking around about their guesses for Build announcements. Right, so I want each of you, and I'll tell you mine too, to tell me a prediction for something that will be announced at Build.
Yikes!
Oh man,
on the spot.
No doubt. Didn't even give us a minute.
They're going to rewrite the Windows file system. Oh wait, that was Vista.
Longhorn.
I'm just kidding. Wrong conference.
Want me to tell you mine first to get the juices flowing?
Yeah, please do.
I'm predicting an Xbox branded Oculus/Vive competitor. I know there's HoloLens, but I think they're going to come out with a headset.
So to go against like the PlayStation's VR?
Yep.
Okay. You, Mike?
They're going to release Visual Studio 2018.
Wow, you really put yourself out there on that one.
I thought, what? No, this is 2017. It would be a huge leap if they did it a year early. Don't you look at a calendar?
Oh, that's awesome.
Silverlight 2017.
Oh, no.
It could happen.
So let me think about this. I mean, it does seem like Microsoft is kind of all in on the augmented/virtual thing. I think what they might be trying to do is trying to get something like Unity cross-platform. I think their next big push is that, they've already tried to do their UWP. So, basically you program for anything in the Windows universe of devices, then you get it. I think their next big thing is going to be trying to push the AR or the VR cross-platform. I think that's what they're going to try and announce.
Well, I don't have any good one to come up with, and to follow up with that, I had the one thought that was maybe like tighter Xamarin, abilities within Visual Studio. Tighten that up to make it even better for Android, iOS, and Windows development. Maybe.
I also thought buying Unity 3D was one of the things I thought about too, because it just kind of makes sense with them, buying the best dev tools, and it's already C#. If they can kind of bring that in and roll it out to even more stuff, it just kind of makes sense. I mean, they already bought Mono,
Yeah, they're definitely making a play to be the one-stop shop for making applications. And dude, I mean, that honestly, I wish somebody would do it, regardless of who it is, whether it's Microsoft or someone. Like, that's always been the pain point. Like, okay, I want to program something. All right, am I going to target Windows, or am I going to target Mac, or am I going to target Linux, right? Like, and if you want to do anything, then you have to have like a full-on dev shop for each one of them, right? So it'd be amazing if they made it happen or somebody else did. So it's pretty exciting. But I honestly think that Microsoft is really all in on this AR VR thing. So I'm with you. I think that they're trying to go the software route with it. I don't think they've done great with the hardware stuff. Like, is Surface Phone or is Windows Phone even going to be a thing anymore? There's been speculation, but it sounds like it's dying. So
Zune was pretty good.
that's the problem, right? Like, they make a lot of good stuff. The Xbox has done phenomenal.
The controller's awesome, right? The Xbox One controllers.
Oh, the Xbox is a great machine, right? Outlaw has it. He loves it.
Yep, big fan.
But
And I love the Elite controller.
Oh, right. Oh, speaking of, did you guys see, this is totally, man, we go off the rails. Did you guys see the new Surface? It's not, what did they call it?
Surface laptop, wasn't it?
The Surface laptop. It's not the Surface Book. It's not the Surface Pro. It's the Surface laptop. And it's interesting. So it's basically kind of upper tier hardware, but they're almost doing another version of Windows RT. It's called Windows S. So it's a stripped down one. You can only get things from the marketplace. However, like, the bare minimum thing of this costs $1,000, but it's an i5 with 8 gig of RAM. Like, it's a decent spec machine. But here's the interesting thing, because they did make a decent spec machine, for $50 more, you can upgrade to the full version of Windows. So now you're getting up there, and they're kind of competing with their own products, right? Like, they're kind of stepping on the toes of the Surface Book and the Surface Pro at a way more affordable price. So I don't know. It's interesting. But outside of the Surface and the Xbox lineup of hardware, like, they haven't really done great in that arena, So that's why I have a hard time thinking that the VR thing is really, I don't know. I don't know.
I don't want to wear anything on my face.
Yeah, they're
Really?
probably going to, another build prediction, they're going to take the JavaScript engine out of Edge. No, just kidding.
All right, so that pretty much wraps up the resources we like. And now it's on to my favorite part of the episode, and it's the tip of the week.
It's the tip of the week.
That's right.
And
So,
I guess I'm going first. Yeah, I found an article here that tells you how to convince your boss to send you to a conference. It's got a nice little list of reasons to give, and if you maybe phrase it like this, you'll have an easier time with the sell. So good luck.
Very nice. All right, so mine actually comes from a pain that I experienced here in the past couple of weeks, and I know I'd seen it and I completely lost it. So if you're in SQL Server specifically and you're concatenating strings, like, there was before let's just say since nvarchar and varchar maxis came along, if you wanted to concatenate a bunch of strings together, you'd typically have to like cast as an nvarchar max and keep doing that.
I'm sorry,
so
what
that
is this
it
type you're referring to? Car?
Yeah,
There's a car?
how do you say it?
Sahar.
I know you guys don't say nvarchar or varchar or varchar.
Nvarchar?
Stop it. So at any rate, just know about this. If you have this huge SQL string and you're concatenating a bunch of stuff together, if you're doing some dynamic SQL or something, if you do pluses, it will truncate stuff out of the middle of that. And you'll wonder what in the world happened. Like, where did my SQL go? Where did my code go that was in here? It'll just disappear. And then and the way that people used to work around it in the old days is they'd cast everything as a max, right? Keep casting as a max and keep doing a plus, and life would be dandy. There's a much better way, a much easier, less insane way of doing things. Use the concat function in SQL Server, and then that way, all you have to do is concat, comma, and then do another single quote and your string. It doesn't truncate any of it. You don't lose chunks of code. You don't lose chunks of data in the middle of it. Concat automatically takes care of putting the big string together and not losing anything.
Can we please get like a TypeScript compiler for, but not TypeScript, but something like that, where we transpile some sort of new features in the SQL language to plain old SQL, so we don't have to think about stuff like that.
I agree, man. Like,
I'm Googling SQL transpiler.
It's one of those things where you look at it, you're like, why is this dynamic SQL failing? And then you're like, oh, wait a second, it's missing half of its query. Why is that, right?
This is the fact that you're doing a dynamic query, and it's probably for something like crazy, like I don't know, dynamic sorting or something ridiculous.
Yes, something that should be easy, right?
Yes, transpiler. Yeah. We should get somebody to make one of these.
I mean, why is it that this stupid query language from the 70s still sucks? Why isn't it up to date?
It's because it's standardized. Down with standards.
It's from the 70s. I don't know.
Down with standards. Oh, there's the answer. All right, your turn, Outlaw.
Yeah, so I have this cool one. So obviously, it's going to be a Git tip. So there's this neat little repo out there on GitHub called Git Extras, and it adds in a whole bunch of nifty little commands. And one of my favorites, for example, is, and this is kind of what led me down that path to begin with, was let's say you're kind of curious to see just some stats on your repository, just in regards to like, who's committing what, when, how often, things like that, right? So, for example, if you have the Git Extras installed locally, you could do Git Summary, and it'll give you out a little report of everyone who's committed into your code, and by percentage or line count of how your repository is getting used, or at least committed to by people. And you can do it by commits or whatever, things like that. You can do like what was another one? Git effort to display effort statistics on number of commits per file. So this was another part of this was actually, now that I think about it, the real reason why I was getting into it is I was trying to look for like what files are changing the most in my repository, right? Because there was this, I think it was a Google white paper from a long time ago where they had suggested that, hey, the files that are changing the most often are probably going to be the biggest source of bugs. And so I was trying to find like, hey, what code in my repository is changing most often? And let me make sure that that's the stuff that is well covered with unit tests, right? So you Git effort, and you can find out these kind of stats on your repository. And there's a whole slew of different bugs, or not bugs. Whoops. There's a whole slew of other commands that you can get. And some of them are, just shortcuts for other features that are already there, but you want to make it a little bit easier. Create branch, delete branch, want to make it a little bit more obvious. delete submodule, because who doesn't want to do that, right? Get delete tag, right? So a bunch of cool little commands, but there are some extra ones in there that are really going to shine if that's the type of thing you're looking for. If you wanted to see some stats like that.
That looks very cool.
And it's a pretty neat little project that's out there. And that's on GitHub, and we'll have a link to it in the show notes.
Excellent. Hey, so I have one more random topic to bring up, only because you said unit test and it sparked a memory, and it'll be gone forever if I don't get it out now. So I'm curious what you guys think. So typically in a C# project or something, you'll have like a separate unit test project, right? Like maybe you have, this is project A, and here's project A tests, and here's project B, here's project B tests. And typically that's done for two reasons. One, you can keep all your tests in one place, and two, you don't have to ship that compiled code to your production environment, right? You can build just the projects you need. So I'm curious you guys' thoughts on what about keeping the tests right next to what they are testing? Joe has an opinion.
I have an irrational hatred of that idea. There's something about it that offends me, even though I totally think that it makes sense in almost every way.
Dude, that was awesome. I cannot wait. I'm slow-moing this on the video. Whatever.
And Go actually they expect you to keep your tests right next to the code, and then they kind of like grab them out when you actually do like a deploy, so that it doesn't get compiled in there. But yeah, I don't know why. I think I just hate that idea because it's so anti the way I've always learned to do things, and I've had such a hard time even doing the things that I've learned to, that it just like makes me madder to try and change it now.
Well, from a more pragmatic point of view, you got other problems with that though, because there's realistically there's assumptions, and I'm not saying they're good, that many test runners have, that they're going to look for tests as in the name of what it's going to try to run. So you're going to have problems there where you could go in and point it to what that's not going to be a showstopper, but I'm just saying from like an out of the box perspective, there are many there that want to look for, because they're not inspecting all of the code, looking for attributes on the code. They're just saying like, hey, you got to point me at what the DLL is that you want me to go look at. And by default, I'm going to look for ones that include test in the name.
So here was where my thought went, and this is why it even came up as something that I wanted to discuss, is I had also done some Node.js stuff with some Angular in the past, and you typically put the test right there next to whatever it's testing, right? So you'd have like a spec file along with whatever you're doing. And the thing that I liked about it is it's almost a reminder that, hey, you need one of these right here next to it. Like if it's off in another project, it's real easy to forget to set up a test for whatever you're trying to do. And I guess that's why
forget to maintain it.
Right. And if it's right there next to it, it's almost like, hey, you can't ignore me, right? And I really like that. And it's funny because if you go out and Google for it, like, hey, should I put my test right next to what's being tested, or should it be in another project? You'll see like it's almost like flame wars, right? Like some people you never do that because you don't want that code to ship with your production stuff, even though you could figure out ways to get around that. And then there's other people that are like, no, you should totally do that so that you know exactly what's being tested and where, and that you do have a test. And so I thought that was, I kind of like the idea of having it right next to it, just from the perspective of, okay, I know that I set it up, right? And I know that I need to maintain that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a good question to ask and a good thing to think about. Like, you don't want to go down the path of kind of group think of like this, I put my tests in the new project because that's, what the internet told me to do. So I do think it's a good question to ask. And I definitely can think of a few cons, but I can think of pros too. So, I don't really know. Maybe it's worth trying to do a, next project like that and just kind of see how it turns out.
I can't believe I flipped you that quickly. That's impressive. Especially after you fell out of your chair almost at the beginning of this.
It was like Neo in the Matrix.
Hey, and I will tell you, so I don't remember which episode it was, but all I did was go up to codingblocks.net and search for unit tests, and I found the little template thing that Outlaw had done previously, and I mean, it's really helpful if you guys haven't actually seen it. Like, it's a nice flow of how he's got it set up for his test fixtures and then all the stuff below it. So I did actually use that. So Thank you for putting that code together.
You're welcome. Very cool.
So, yep. All right.
And then did you put the test in a separate project though, or did you just
it was
like
right
put it
next to
side
it.
by side?
No, it was actually right next to it, and this ended up being painful for me because I've been screwing around with Visual Studio for Mac, and so I was, trying to do my own thing. You can go in and create a new test project, and it'll set up all your references and everything for you, and everything's dandy. But of course, I wanted to go the path of most pain, and I tried to include it, next to it. And so I went into NuGet and I said, okay, give me the latest version of NUnit.
Right.
Well, Mono with Mac with Visual Studio does not like the latest version of that. And you have to go back to 2.6 point something. And,
not even
and so,
2.7.
yeah, like 45 minutes into it, I'm like, oh my God, it was just a version thing, right? Like, because I kept trying to run it. And I'm like, why is this thing blowing up? So...
Yeah, I mean, that actually brings up, going back to your question though, as I'm thinking about this, it really depends on the language environment that you're in. So like in your Angular example, that makes a lot more sense than in a compiled language like a C# would, because then in that project, you got to include those other DLLs that are going to be linked in that in your production app aren't necessary at all. And then as it relates, like you brought up NUnit, for example, as it relates to NUnit, depending on what your build server is going to be, you may need to include the NUnit, what's it called? The NUnit test adapter,
runner.
test runner adapter, something like that. That's totally not even needed in your production app. So, I mean, even though you could get around like, hey, don't include these files in the release, or if def them out.
Yep.
But that's still kind of
it's dirty, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mocking libraries. If you have any sort of text files or data files that use with the testing, all of that stuff is you have to exclude it somehow.
Yeah, it sucks, right? Like the fact that that's even a thing, because now we're talking about more about the way that particular frameworks are set up as opposed to what makes the most sense in terms of, yeah.
See, what Joe just said kind of sparked a thought in my mind too, because then like I could see it making more sense if you were thinking about like this from like a C kind of app that you're building, that you could easily exclude code that you don't want in a particular flag, like debug versus release, by if defing it out, right? And in your make file, you could do similar things to like include or exclude which libraries you want. But then that's kind of gross, because if we go back to the 12-factor app, right, like you're totally diverging what you're debugging and testing
shipping.
versus what you're shipping, which
Right.
doesn't sound great at all, right? And then if we go back to something like a Visual Studio environment for, say, a .NET project like C#, you're typically not touching those solution files or those project files to that type of specificity where you're don't include this under this build or that. That just sounds gross.
Yeah, I agreed. I mean, it was just one of those things that came up, and I was like, man, it really makes a lot of sense for it to be beside it. But the way that the tooling and the builds are set up for like a .NET,
so it makes a lot of
sense
in a particular language environment, but it's not a one size fits all rule.
Right.
I think is where I'm going to end up on it.
Yep.
Yeah, so maybe it's just insufficient tooling. Maybe that's 5 years from now, maybe everyone's going to be doing it like that. They're going to, can you imagine back in the day, and we'll create a new project and everyone would just forget about it.
Yeah, I think things like that, the reason why they work well in some environments is because there's a lot of things set up to look at names, right? Like there's a lot of introspection. If it's got .spec in the name, then you know that you're going to toss it out and not include it in your bundle, right? And tooling's not there for .NET. So, yeah, I don't know. Interesting. Just another random side thought I had. So,
No, that's a good one. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our show. We hope you guys have enjoyed this this special episode. Be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, and more using your favorite podcast app. Be sure to leave us a review if you haven't already. We would greatly, super duper appreciate it. You can head to www.codingblocks.net/review. And if you have already left us a review, just know that you definitely put a smile on our faces. We super appreciate that. We can't express it enough.
totally. And while you're up there at codingblocks.net, check out all our show notes, examples, discussions, and more.
And send your feedback, questions, and rants to the Slack channel, codingblocks.slack.com, and you can find a form to invite yourself by going to codingblocks.net/Slack. And follow us on Twitter at codingblocks, or head over to codingblocks.net and find all our social links at the top of the page.
Woohoo! I like how he changed his voice here. There's social links.
It started off as an accident, but I thought it sounded so cool, I just kept going with it.
It totally sounded.
I should talk about this all the time. Sean Connery.
Totally, dude.
Sean Connery. Oh, I didn't realize that's what you were trying to do.
What? It wasn't obvious?
Oh, it totally is now.